Thanks. Hi, everybody. It's always great to hear an introduction because really my whole career has just been, what do I love doing and what do I want to do next? And you look back at it and have somebody else tell you all about it, it makes more sense. Seems to make more sense. So I'm thrilled to have driven over from Milwaukee. Some people think it's really, really far away to Milwaukee, but and I'm going to continue driving from here up north, where my parents live in Boulder Junction. Anybody know where Boulder? People know where that is. And to spend the weekend with them as they prepare to move down to Milwaukee in, I say, the next move of their lives, which will be a little more supported and closer to family. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit. I figured this was a perfect transition from the conversation about the growing despair in midlife, which is where I find myself, into the land of meaning making and joy and wonder, which has been the work that I've done for the last 25 years, 30 years. First thing I want you to do is, in between bites, turn to the person next to you, and we're just going to take a minute and ask them what fills you with awe and wonder. I'm hearing some great answers. I'm going to actually ask you to hold on to those. This is not a memory test, but I would love to, you can prompt each other to remind each other at the end if anybody wants to share them, but I'd like us to kind of hold those in the background. And then if I have time, because sometimes I go into a fugue state and just sort of forget what time it is, we'll come back to that. So somebody remind me and we'll answer that. But first I have another couple questions for us to consider. You don't have to answer this. It's just what I call a beautiful question. And these are questions that open up a shared path of discovery that have no right or wrong answer, but just sort of make you jump the track of your normal everyday way that you think and consider something from deep in your heart of imagination and creativity. If your feet could talk, what would they say? If you could fly anywhere right now, I've actually done keynote talks where I guide people through flying. It's really fun. We won't do that today. You're chewing. I don't want to, that would be unsafe. If you could fly anywhere right now, where would you go? And here's a question. When exactly do you want to stop learning and growing? When do you want to stop having meaningful connections to the people around you? Never, somebody said. I think one thing to think about is as we get closer to the end of life, our systems are not built to support this. We say we want to keep growing and learning. Do we really support that? Do people not only have access to housing, which is very important, but access to meaning making, access to culture making, access to learning, all the way to the end, all the way to the last moments? And can that be something that you share together with the people in your life who are close to you as you go through this phase? Is that something you can do together? Again, just something for the back of your mind as we go through. A few slides that talk about probably all the information that's been covered from this morning. I only had a chance to hear the last speaker. But this is where we are. The global aging population with increasing chronic conditions, 47.5 million people with dementia across the world today, expected to triple. There is no cure, and I'm one of the skeptics who thinks that there will be one. I'm not so sure, but research already clearly points us toward a way to prevention and better care through improving relationships and care environments. So while we might not yet be able to get into the nuts and bolts of what's working in the brain, we do know that we know how to improve care, and we know how to improve care environments to make drastic changes in the way people experience dementia all the way to the end of their lives. Caregiving crisis. We do not have enough of them. They are underpaid, they are undervalued, and they are overworked. And ageism causes an innovation lag in this field. Just some cold, hard facts for you to chew on over lunch. Social isolation is a global public health crisis. I just like throwing this stuff out there, like period at the end of the sentence, right? Just mild little phrases like that. It is the health risk equivalent of 15 cigarettes a day, and it is happening across the generations. It is not just happening in late life. More older adults now live alone ever than before, and maybe with the relationship data, maybe that's okay, but I think it also leads to an increasing amount of social isolation and the fraying of the fabric of our communities. Ageism puts all ages at risk, and I just want to reiterate what Carol said. Aging is about how we understand aging from little kid all the way to the very end. So I've taken as a new sort of tact when people say, oh, we don't, like funders especially, the philanthropic world does not, they love funding kids because they see a longer opportunity for return on investment, right? And very few family foundations in particular will fund aging work. And I say, you're actually, those kids are going to grow up to have worse late life because you're not supporting changing the way we understand aging. When you have a negative self-attitude about aging, you live 7.5 years less. So when you take in the ageism and the negative self-attitudes about aging and the experience of aging, it affects your life, no matter what age you are, right? So ageism puts all ages at risk. People with negative attitudes live 7.5 years less than people with neutral or positive attitudes. One of my favorite researchers, Becca Levy out of Yale, that's one of her studies. So I, very early on, with my interest in the arts and humanities, came into and sort of my career started as the field of creative aging was growing. Over the past 20 years, the field of creative aging has just blossomed, and it's been a joy to watch it grow. I just put up here just a few of the main organizations that are still out there working. Some have come and gone. The National Center for Creative Aging unfortunately disbanded, but now we have these really great programs. Lifetime Arts is based out of New York. They actually train teaching artists to offer really lifelong learning programs for older adults to get into the arts. And they run them out, most commonly out of libraries, which I feel are probably the next generation senior center because they don't have the stigma of aging. I don't want to go to a senior center kind of thing. It's just a library. It's a cultural center for all ages. So they do a lot of really fascinating work. The Alzheimer's Poetry Project, started by Gary Glasner, does really incredible work. Who here had to memorize poetry in school? There's something about the rhythms of poetry that reach people with Alzheimer's. It stays in your brain. It's like music. It's one of the last things to go because of the musicality of it, I think, and the rhythm of the language. So he's doing some great work there. Arts for the Aging is an organization that's real typical in DC. They train teaching artists who then go out into the community and offer programming and classes for older adults. And here in Wisconsin, it's based in Wisconsin, but it's now spreading out over the country, is an organization called SPARK, Cultural Programming for People with Memory Loss. They run programs out of art museums and cultural institutions. So the Children's Museum here in Madison is one of those, is part of the SPARK Alliance. They're all over the state and actually into Minnesota as well. And now some other people have started getting in on it, like out in Denver and other museums as well. So now what's happening is people are insisting, I've been a member of this museum my entire life. I brought my children here for educational programs. I go through tours. I just now happen to be having some memory loss. Why should I stop being able to go to this cultural institution because you don't have programming that's meant for me, or in which I can feel comfortable learning and growing all the way to the end of my life? And a lot of museums have been realizing they need to create educational programming to be accessible to older adults with a variety of cognitive challenges. And that's really what's happening, is that these programs are meeting those needs. So then there's the organization that I started in 1998, which is kind of hard to believe for me, TimeSlips. It started because I was researching theater and performance, and found that really theater, which is playing a role, learning to play a new role, could actually change the way our country, Western cultures, think about aging, which was a misconception that it was necessarily a narrowing of who you were, like almost like a cooking metaphor of a reduction of your personality, right? You just got more, oh, she's just more and more herself, right? She's just more rigid, right? That it was sort of this strange concept. When I was encountering a 92-year-old woman playing Juliet for the first time, this was not what you normally think of as the aging process. It was just a continued just growth model by taking on new roles. And so I wanted to see if that, I wrote a whole book about that, and then I wanted to see if that kind of approach could work with people with profound disabilities, people in a nursing home, a locked unit, people with Alzheimer's in a nursing home in Milwaukee. And I ended up volunteering there for about 6 weeks, trying a lot of different things that did not work, until one day I just tore a picture of, really it was the Marlboro Man, out of a magazine. And I said, you know what? We don't remember so well. Let's make something up. And I went right into improv, and we told the most delightful story about the Marlboro Man, whose name was Fred Astaire. He was married to Gina Autry, and it went on for 45 minutes. I said, where do they live? And they said Oklahoma. And then a woman who had not said a word for 6 weeks lifted up her head and started singing the entire song of Oklahoma. Oklahoma, where the wind goes sweeping down the plain. And it was awe-inspiring that people were right there, and yet they had turned themselves into themselves because no one could reach them or cared to anymore. And they could learn and grow and play and become friends and a network of people. And that experience launched me into the work that I do that I'll share with you today. TimeSlips as a nonprofit brings meaning and joy to late life by pouring creativity into our care relationships and our care systems. Here is a little video, if I can make it work.
What is TimeSlips? We are a nonprofit inspiring a global movement to bring meaning and joy to late life through creative engagement. Let me show you what I mean. When the changes that come with aging meet the demands of our daily lives, it can be difficult to connect. Even if we want to connect, it can be hard to know how. When we do try to connect, our impulse is to draw on the past. But for people with memory loss, this approach can lead to shame and embarrassment, focusing on who the person was rather than accepting and valuing who they are now. TimeSlips offers another approach, to shift from the expectation of memory to the freedom of imagination. In the emotional and symbolic language of the arts, there are no wrong answers. People we thought might be lost to us, we can reach with sound and movement, with words and images. We can find joy again, together, connecting through creativity, one-on-one, at the bedside or kitchen table, or in groups, at libraries, memory cafes, museums, or in assisted living, senior centers, or skilled nursing. TimeSlips is fueling a creative care revolution to change the way we think about late life and how we engage with elders, from a time of isolation and loss to a time of growth and meaningful connection. Connect through creativity with TimeSlips. Learn more, timeslips.org.
Thank you. She says it so much more succinctly than I could, so I let that play to show you. An example of that is somebody who told me this woman is obsessed with her foot. She's clearly in pain, but she's just crying out, and she's just can't get off of this, the pain in her foot. And I said, what if you opened it to, if your foot could talk, what would it say? What would it tell you? What color is it experiencing? Opening up creative solutions and expression, so that you're opening up these channels that other channels might be blocked off, but that's an opportunity. I've really come to see my work, to connect back to the first question I made you ask, as facilitating awe through creative engagement. These are the 5 components of it, which is improvisation. Yes, and is the core of improvisation. Improvisation means you observe things very intensely that are happening around you, and you add to them. You accept them, and then you add to them in a positive way. It's a real practice to live in that way. It's hard because no is actually the easiest thing to say. For some people, not for everyone. Some people have a hard time with no. But it's really accepting and adding to the moment. Asking beautiful questions, which I talked a little bit about. Offering proof of listening. Some people hear a lot about authentic listening or generous listening, or I talk about proof because you're actually taking steps to show the person they've been heard. So it makes you take steps rather than say, well, I think I'm practicing authentic listening. It's hard to know, but it puts you into a step. I'm going to repeat what you say. I'm going to write down what you say. I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to eye contact, all those different elements that show proof of listening. Rigor and value means that you're showing commitment in some way. You're putting energy, you're putting your training, you're valuing what's coming out of your engagement in such a way that the person feels valued. By valuing the story that comes out of your exchange, you're valuing the person. And then connection. And this goes back to all the research on meaning making, Viktor Frankl, there's lots of people I could quote here. But by connecting to the larger world beyond the self is where the meaningfulness really comes in one's life. Too often, I think, I call them kind of story rater programs where they train young people to go, or kids in school, go talk to your grandma, get a story about when they were young. Like, what was the world like? That's sort of like story rating, or story mining and excavation. It's not about an exchange or asking the person who they are now or what they think about the world now or how they want to shape the world to come. It's really sort of a narrow focus on that. And so this idea of really connecting beyond the self to something bigger than just yourself is the final component there. And I just want to take a second also to define awe, because sometimes, the word awesome has become like Kleenex. We don't know anymore the root of the word, right? It's an emotional response to a perceptually vast stimuli that transcends our current frame of reference. Another one is a direct and initial experience or feeling when faced with something amazing, incomprehensible, or sublime. And the Gallagher book is really a neurophenomenological, I can't remember the full title. They interviewed astronauts because of the overview effect, where astronauts, when they look back at the Earth, that just literally blows their mind, right? I mean, it's such a vast shift in their perception that it fills them with wonder, the curiosity, and it changes the way that they perceive things. It creates an opening for learning. And there's all kinds of things that come out of the experience of awe, including humility, which helps with social integration. And so when people experience something awe-filling together, it promotes social integration. That is some of the grounding for creating friendships in late life. 3 access points to awe: nature, creativity, and spirituality, right? Some people see the spirituality as encompassing all, like nature, they see spirituality in nature or they see it in creativity, so there's some blur and overlap. And if you're a landscape painter who's painting outside of a church, you got all 3 right away, right? But I just wanted to talk about that little definition there. So TimeSlips, the work that we do is sort of, we'll use a prompt. Any prompt, it can be a question or an image or an object. I've used a prompt when I'm walking with someone, behind someone, pushing them in a wheelchair. We stop at a window and we just use what's outside of the window. And I ask open-ended questions and we share the creation of something. And it can happen through movement or sound or words. If the person is beyond language, you can use movement or sound as well. And the research we've now, since we moved our training online, have really found that there's new studies being done all the time that I don't even know about, which is pretty great because I don't have to do them anymore. And they found that it increases well-being. It improves relationships, particularly this was a 20 nursing home study, so it improved relationships between staff and elders. It improves positive social engagement. And among the students who are trained to do this, either for service learning or as part of their coursework, it dramatically, researchers would say significantly, theater people would say dramatically, it increases and improves their attitudes about aging and dementia in particular, the capacity of people with dementia. So I just wanted to go over a few, my work and the TimeSlips work have sort of overlapped now, so it's what our programs are that we offer through TimeSlips. We just started this year a pilot called the Next Gen program, which is college and high school students facilitating creative engagement. And right now we have a pilot in collaboration with Leading Age, which is a membership organization for aging services providers, most of the nonprofit ones. Across the country. We have 13 sites across the country that are training students to either live in care communities for a year and offer community building programs through the arts, or learning just the simple storytelling technique and then doing it on a semester basis as integrated into their coursework in high school as service learning or their college coursework. And here is Thorin, who was living at Luther Manor in Milwaukee. He's a theater maker, and he helped them produce a play. And then when his own theater company lost their performance space, the Luther Manor said, bring Richard III here, and you can perform it here. So this is right before one of the performances. This is Ian on the right, who's a muralist and whose work was featured in Black Cat Alley in Milwaukee. And he brought his friends from East Castle Place, where he was living, down to see his murals, and then they went to a nearby coffee shop for a dynamic conversation, as you can tell. And this is Molly, who was working both at St. John's, and then she was a 2-year SARE, student artist in residence. Here she's doing a felt soap class with people with dementia. And she then became, through an NEA grant, the coordinator of the SARE program and is helping us spread it across the country. This is Erin, who lived at High Point in Milwaukee. She did all kinds of things. She did visual art and poetry and just all kinds of different things. And I include her because in the Flourish Festival, which was where we share at the end of the year, and you're all welcome to come to the Flourish Festival. This year is May 31st in Milwaukee. She wrote some of her journal entries up on the wall in the gallery. And this one says, advice from Thelma, who's her friend. Don't spend your time with a bully. Find the best catch. Even through the crummy days, look at the good things you've been given. That is what matters. And 4, I love you too. Now go do your homework. This is Andrew, who's in his 2nd year living at Luther Manor. He did a balloon shaping and story workshop. He also is a theater maker and helped them produce a play and runs regular writing workshops. He's just a delight and loves living at Luther Manor. And Angela, who's an MFA in arts in the art and design at UWM, also living at Luther Manor, and this year living in one of the Laureate Group homes. We've also started a program for family and friends, which is being supported by the Ralph Wilson Foundation based in Detroit, so we've been doing a lot of piloting there. And one was to create, our website, which I'll go over in just a minute, has all kinds of free prompts. There's probably 300 prompts on the site, and I'll show you how that works. But Ralph Wilson is helping us pilot a take-home imagination kit that you can use at home, at the bedside, if you have to go to the doctor's office and you want something to do, if you go into a restaurant and you want something to do. And it's just fun. And in the focus, one of the focus groups that I got to sit in on, we just put the box of all the cards and the questions on the table, and we said, we're not going to give you any instructions. We're just going to see if this is intuitive. And they opened the box, and the room just filled with laughter, and it was sharing stories. And at the end, we came back to a little circle, and one of the gentlemen with dementia said, "What was the point of this? We just laughed and had a lot of fun and got to know each other. Was that the point? Because then it works." I was like, all right. Check, right? And then we're also piloting in Detroit something called engagement parties. Who'd like to go to an engagement party? It sounds fun, doesn't it? Oh, come on. More of you want to go to an engagement party. I know you do. You're just eating, right, still. It's really designed as kind of an informal grassroots effort to say my neighbor, she's having trouble, and people don't know how to engage with her, and I've noticed that people are kind of staying away. I'm going to host an engagement party from my neighborhood, and we're going to learn these techniques, and we're going to learn that maybe you can tell in your conversation with her that she's forgotten something, or she's looped she's repeated the same story twice. How not to stop there, how not to get shocked by that, and to keep going to connection. And just a few of the simple tools that we have to teach people how to do that, so that it's positive, and you can figure out how to build on the strengths that are there rather than get stopped by the loss, because it's there. It's there. It's there for all of us, right? I can't remember the name of somebody, but I'm still going to keep talking to them, right? But it can get scarier and people stop. The engagement party is about learning how not to stop in that situation. So here's the website, and I'm just going to walk you through it a little bit, because we just redid this. It was pretty awesome experience. Awesome as in totally overwhelming and vast. So here's the Creativity Center. Have a gentle conversation, ask a beautiful question, make up a story together. This is sort of what we call TimeSlips Classic, like Coke Classic. And then here's hundreds of prompts. And say, I'm just going to go, whoop, okay, freaking out on me. I'm going to go to, whoop, now it's making me sign in. That's not good. How to do this? Well, that shows you. I'm going to maybe try to go back here. Creativity Center. do this again. I'm a Mac user, so I'm kind of like freaking out on this. Okay. Oh, I see. Thank you. Thank you, the great and powerful Oz. Okay. So well, now I can't control it. So I'm going to tell you to go to timeslips.org. And there we go. But now I can't see it. So can I guide you to click on things? Okay, so click on, the penguins are cute, right? You want to tell a story about the penguins? So click, well, now it's going to make you sign in. It doesn't usually make you do that. I'm not sure why it's doing that. But if you click on there, they'll come to a page where you can download a worksheet, which has open-ended questions, the picture, and a little place for you to write your story. Or you can, you can use it and then go back and then write it down, put your story onto the website, publish it, share it with friends. You can actually invite a collaborator. So if you want to do this at home and you have a kid who lives in Seattle, because everybody's kid lives in Seattle, don't they? You can ask them to play with you, and you can each write on the story, which is kind of cool. You can audio record your response. You can also, if you write it down on a sketch pad, you can take a picture of it and upload the response. There are 21,000 stories on our website. We have 832 certified facilitators in 48 states and 20 countries, which vastness blows my mind. Awesome. It's really pretty incredible. This is all free. The Creativity Center is free to use. So we, people who've helped us shape a business plan are like, you got to wall off the Creativity Center and have people pay $29 a year. I'm like, you know what? That's exhausting. Just open it up and let people, because people need it. So it's there. If it asks you to sign in, the sign-in is free. So don't get nervous about that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now and abandon all hope on the dual screen fancy thing that I'm doing up here. So this just gives you a taste of some of the prompt images. The stories, if you, on the Creativity Center, you can also kind of scroll down and see some of the stories we've listed as favorites. And one of the ones from a Texas nursing home, from the answer to, if your foot could talk, what would it say, is so profoundly beautiful that you really should just go to read that one anyway. The other thing we do is focus on organizations and organizational training, and we call it building creative communities of care. I'm just going to walk you through what that means. What happens when you bring creativity, and I just finished a book about this that'll be out not soon enough, but it's in design, so it's coming. It's probably late spring. It'll be here in late spring. What happens when you bring creativity and care together? Essentially, it makes us reimagine creativity not as the act of a single genius, but as collaborative. And because creativity is generative, it makes us reimagine care not as this empty pit that you're pouring your energy and resources into, but as reciprocal and generative. It is something that grows. It can create growth and learning. The care relationship can create that growth and learning. It makes us look at identifying people's strengths and their capacities for being generative and creative. It makes us look at cultural institutions as healing places, and healing places as places where we could make meaning and culture. It makes us reimagine that false division that happened somewhere in the 19th century where museums and hospitals got put in separate buildings, right? Why did we do that? And really over the last 30 years, 40 years has been a long, slow, and we're still part of it, merging back together of meaning-making, health, and wellness. It also makes us reimagine what we fund, what we measure, and what we teach. So I just want to give you an example of like what an activity. Does anyone live in assisted living or work in assisted living, particularly memory care? You might not live in memory care, but you might live or work there. So there's been a move toward bringing activities back that are kind of instrumental to daily life. So helping people feel like they're being useful and being part of the community by folding the laundry, having daily responsibilities for their care, rather than this odd hospital or hotel service model that we've developed for care, which is kind of strange. Unless you really just would like to be pampered for the rest of your life, which maybe some of you would. So here is folding laundry. If you reconfigured this in an awe-inspiring way through art and creativity, I'm going to show you a slide from an artist who's from Madison, grew up with me in Janesville, Brenda Baker, who did this as part of the Fermentation Fest at the Worm Farm Institute up in Sauk County. Some of you may know that program. This is called Laundry Day. So what is awe? That sound is awe, right? It was a whole community engaged project. Bring in the laundry, tell the stories of the laundry, dye, learn how to dye. How in the heck are we going to hang this? Help us hang this. Here's just a couple of the people. So what if we took that and what we understand about how we could create beauty, how we can work together. I now do projects that are, I say I'll only do a project that's impossible to do by myself. I want hundreds of people to have to help me do a project, that kind of a scale. So one of the projects I did in, 2009 to 2011 was called the Penelope Project. So at Luther Manor in Wauwatosa, independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing, adult day, a professional theater company, Sojourn Theater, and my university students with another colleague of mine, let's retell Homer's Odyssey from the perspective of Penelope, the hero who never left home. Because if we could rewrite her story as a heroine, the person who stayed and kept home, we can reconfigure how people think of people living in a home, right? It was an astonishing experience. Here is, we staged an original performance on the day that Odysseus comes back, and he's disguised as the old beggar, but also coming back to find Penelope is Mira, who has not seen her mother, who lives in assisted living for 20 years. They both are coming back after 20 years. So it's a buddy story of collapsed mythic time. It's both real time and mythic time at the same time, which by doing that changes the way you forever see the people and the place. It's not just Luther Manor. It's not Ithaca, the island, the Greek island. It's Luthica. Right? That was what the director of the nursing home said. Oh, I get it. This is Luthica. Yes. Can we print T-shirts that say that, please? And we'll be good to go. So here's Caroline Imhoff playing Athena, who helps Odysseus shoot the arrow through 12 axe handles to prove who he is. Here's a scene. I'm just giving you a super quick version of this because I'm already almost out of time. The final choral scene where anyone who wanted to, which was really hard for a theater maker because we couldn't rehearse, anyone who wanted to could play Penelope in the chorus in the final scene. And people with pretty deep Alzheimer's, macular degeneration and no vision, perfectly fine person who wandered in from independent living and had no idea we were doing a play. Family members who were so hungry to participate in something meaningful. The adult daughter of a woman who lived in independent living whose father had a massive stroke and had to move to the nursing home, and they actually could participate in something together. And the other thing to know is we realized, and the staff realized, that they had never collaborated on a project across all areas of care, which was just further seeding that divide and the stigma across the areas of care. So this was just incredibly powerful. We did it all as call and response, so you didn't have to memorize a thing. Would you do something like that if you didn't have to memorize? Everybody wanted in. It was great. So the project I just did, like I said, I like to try impossible things. So rather than do just one care community, like the Penelope Project, we decided to do 12 rural nursing homes in Kentucky. And some of these were very, I'm telling you, very rural. Thank God for Airbnb. No hotels anywhere. 4 to a region, and one of the sites in the region would be the performance site. All 12 of us worked together to reimagine the story of Peter Pan. I'm glad you like that. We called it Wendy's Neverland. We didn't know what we were going to call it until the very end. This was they're all 2- and 3-year projects. The story of this one, to get it into mythical time, is that Wendy is finishing growing up. She's on hospice. She's been living at the nursing home for 10 years. She is so beloved. She's been telling everyone who will listen for 10 years stories of Neverland and the crocodile and the Lost Boys. And every time someone said Lost Boys, we had triggered, the whole community knew to sing, I once was lost, but now I'm found. And so and we'd say it accidentally, because the whole script is basically improv, and someone would say, Lost Boys, and then the whole place would, and the audience caught on right away, so they became part of the fabric of the performance itself. So she's been telling those stories for 10 years. She's now at the end of her life. No one believes her. Why would you believe these stories? She just watched the movie too many times, or read the book, or whatever, saw the Broadway play, I don't know what it was. But they love her so much, they're recreating those stories for her to honor her at the end of her life. And they're inviting the whole community into experience with them. And so we start out with a pre-show, and one of the things we do with our creative community of care training is we teach them creative asset mapping. What are the creative skills you have in your staff, in your volunteers, in your residents, in your elders, in your community that you could tap to be part of this performance? And let me tell you, Kentucky has a lot of musicians that are really awesome. So we had a mandolin player, a couple guitar players. At this one, we had an accordion player. It was amazing. And we sang the opening pre-show was just about simple sing-alongs to get the audience to play with us a little bit before we take them into a nursing home for an interactive, immersive theater experience. The staff welcomes everyone. They tell them the story. And Jimmy is actually a resident who became King of the Pirates. The staff made this incredible coat for him. And then a little bit of face paint goes a long way, let me tell you. One of the stations was the positive thought station, because in order to fly, you have to have a positive thought. And so we wrote them on, one of the activities at all 12 nursing homes was, can you create 1,000 clouds? And they did, and they decorated them all. And then we wrote the positive thoughts on the clouds and then put them up all over. The other was a fear station, because you also you have to shed your fears. And the crocodile is kind of the symbol of the fears. So we wrote them on canning lids, which is also an iconic thing in Kentucky. And you wrote your fears, which many of the fears were about aging in the nursing home itself. And we wrote them on these canning lids, and then we affixed them to this old green wool coat that became the sacred cloak of the crocodile. And then we had the flight school. This is what you see here. And we asked the question of people, if you could fly anywhere, where would you fly? Why don't you just shout out a few?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Ireland. Disneyland. Say it. The moon. All right. You guys are right on board. We had 4 murals that were on crankies. One of them were of tropical beach scenes, which was a theme of all the answers we got. One was outer space. One was famous monuments of cities like New York and Paris, and because people always said those. And one was maybe a little different in Kentucky, was home in a certain county. So we had rural scenes of Kentucky with tractors. And then we had pixie dust, imaginary pixie dust, and we had our positive thoughts and our fears, and we guided everyone through flying, and we flew, and then the crankies turned, and it really felt like you were flying. You can just see a little bit of how the crankies worked there. And then there was the crocodile, who interrupts that scene. You can see the canning lids on top of him. Our set designer was a crazy genius. Actually, one of the elders watching him work said, "You're an ingenious little fella." So we literally printed a t-shirt for him. That was great. It's built on a wheelchair as well. The back, you can't really see it very well, but he comes in and he's not expected, and the staff goes crazy. Code croc, code croc. We have regulations. We cannot have a crocodile in this nursing home. And so we're all a little spooked by that, but then we calm down and we go to Wendy's room. Well, here you see actually some of the people were quite tickled with the crocodile. We figure out that he wants his sacred cloak. So once we give him that, they think maybe he wants one of the musicians is wearing Crocs, those sandals, and they throw their Crocs at him. He doesn't want those. He wants the sacred cloak. So then we go to Wendy's room, which is the place where she's been holding court. And one of the simple ways to transform the environment was we had a beautiful, our stage manager was a really gifted painter, and she painted this on the shades. You can see those are just blinds. And one of the artists in residence who was assigned to one of the clusters was a musician, a professional musician, singer-songwriter out of Louisville, really deeply talented woman, who led them on a songwriting program. If I could tell Peter what I know now, and the song was just beautiful. And there was a choral element that we taught the audience. So we also wrote these words up here, and it ends with, if I could tell Peter what I know now, I'd tell him I love you, don't go. And then there were other little verses that people sang as well, but yeah, so you see Wendy is actually there, and as we're having that scene, Wendy's room is also covered with letters to the Lost Boys. I once was, just kidding, you don't have to do it. And also audio of the elders in their own voices reading those letters about what they would have missed if they wouldn't have grown up. Things that they miss about childhood, but that these are the things that we wouldn't have been able to do had we not grown up. And though I tell you, we had Eversound headphones, which are wireless headphones, and I didn't expect that to be the station where people lost it, but they lost it because of the power of the elders' voices reading their own letters was really beautiful. But that scene gets interrupted because we have another code croc. Wendy is actually in the garden with the crocodile. And we see them, and Wendy's played by an elder, and we hear a recording, which is the two of them in this really sweet conversation because they are old friends. And they're reminiscing about what a jerk Peter was, and really and he's so sad. He's like, well, you can't go. And she's like, I'm just growing up. You know, it's okay. And he says, you're not afraid of me. And she said, why would I be afraid of you? Time, because his name is TikTok, time is bigger than all of us. And he says, what are you afraid of? And she says that no one believes me. He says, I believe in you. And he puts his hand up, and she meets his hand. And it's just a beautiful moment. So in the story itself, if you believe in fairies, you're supposed to clap. We just did this, one clap. And then the crocodile says, I'm going to teach you all how to believe. And follow me. And then it becomes kind of a second line parade back through the nursing home. And now that we know how to believe, there's bubble machines, the fairies are coming out. It's a pretty incredible place. And when you get to the dining room, there's about a dozen elders in a circle, face paint, either dressed as, we sort of got mixed up. They were kind of fairy pirates and Lost Boy fairy pirates, and they were all mixed up. But they all had face paint and wings and, eye patches, and it was great. And they go around, and we hear something, audio recording of all of them doing what we called the I Am poem, which was another exercise we did. So you hear in their own voices. And then you hear, they stop and they say their own names. I am Madge, just very simply. And then they all stop and say, we are Wendy. And they turn around and they say, I am Wendy. They turn out to the audience, I am Wendy. I believe. And they put their hand out, which is another moment, just like in Penelope, when you don't know who's going to be on stage. Is the audience going to come up and believe or not? And it's kind of a vulnerable moment. And everyone did. Everyone did. And it became a long scene because the audience wanted to believe in everybody. So they went all around the circle. I include this slide here because Shirley had not come out of her room since October, and this was March. And she came out, she was curious what we were doing. She had been the activity director at this home, and she had a massive health condition and had to come right back from the hospital to the nursing home where she'd worked for 40 years and closed the door, instructed the staff to close the door. And she was totally transformed by this process. And she came out and she wanted to be in it every day. And we made her the queen of the fairies. And so she opened each performance with a prayer. Prayer's big in Kentucky. And closed every performance with a prayer as well. For people who had limited mobility, we created finger dancers so that they could move and make things dance. After the belief scene, we hear the sound of Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon, and we do what's called the wheelchair ballet, which is a jubilant dance to Fly Me to the Moon, and they're flying, they're flying. And the final scene is, the song of that is, I love you, and then there's an embrace at the end. And then that's not it, as if that's not emotional enough. The crocodile says, are you ready, Wendy? Let's fly. And he says, don't be afraid, they're going to help us. And everybody comes together toward the piano and the other musicians, and we sing the gospel song, I'll Fly Away, at such a raucous and jubilant bent that it's sort of, you feel the sorrow and the joy all at the same time, which I think is also kind of an awe experience. The elders had the choreography to it and taught the audience, so we were all doing it at the same time, and you see that happening right here. And then they leave. Wendy and the crocodile fly away. And in walks another character. In Morgantown, it was this guy, Tom Sawyer, came up from the river. He's also a local legendary mandolin player. And he says, what's going on here? And this is the administrator of the nursing home right next to him. And she says, well, we've got your room all ready for you. He goes, well, has it got air conditioning? Yep. It's got heat? Yep. Oh, it sounds good to me. And so he comes in. He's the story that nursing home picked to tell next year. And the other nursing homes picked Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, and one of them was in the boyhood home of Abraham Lincoln, and so they were telling that story. Wisconsin has had a kind of a different version of this, which is just the Creative Community of Care storytelling training. We didn't have an artist in residence attached to each one, but we've had 50 nursing homes go through the training, and 25 more are in the loop right now, all across the state. And I include the red dots, which are the museums that we're collaborating with. We've collaborated with on prompts, so that some of the prompts are real localized, like the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame was really fun. The National Historic Cheesemaking Center, I had to do that one, and all kinds of different ones. I'm not going to have time to play this, but This was one of the images that one of the nursing homes in Wisconsin told a story about, and it's a fantastic tale that then we took the story back to another nursing home and had them choreograph it, read the story aloud in their own voices, and then we gave all of that to an animator who created a karaoke piece so that we present it so people can experience the story and play with them remotely. So we do all kinds of crazy, fun things. Our current initiatives, as I said, we just redid our web platform. We have another round where we're going to train 50 nursing homes in Kentucky. We're putting that grant in. We're putting a grant in to train 20 in Tennessee. We're doing Wisconsin right now. My vision is really, that we're doing the nursing homes because that's where the funding stream is, but really, the really big vision is that culture making and meaning making should be wherever the person is. If you're living out in a rural farmhouse, you should have it by phone. If you're in independent living in an apartment building, you should have it there. Adult day, library, wherever. It should be the soft tissue that connects you and creates a bed of meaning for you as you transition places in late life as well. It should be the constant. That's my dream. So the dementia, Dementia Inclusive Durham, which is DID, is hopefully, if a grant comes through, going to be our first opportunity to do an entire city, all of their system, faith-based communities, educational systems, the business community, arts and culture, all of them can get training and send it out through their networks on a common project that we collaborate on together. We've also collaborated with Meals on Wheels, so we have experience doing it that way as well. Oh my goodness, I don't know what happened there. I'm almost done anyway. So the Imagination Kit will be coming out, and then, did it come back up? I really see, let's see if this will come back up. Slideshow from the current slide. There it is. The ultimate dream for me is to infuse meaningful engagement into every care system and every care relationship. Achieve social prescription for care, for creative engagement, and end ageism faster than the 400 years predicted by bringing youth into meaningful engagement with elders. And then I just say, what if we knew our lives were meaningful all the way to the end? So thank you very much.